Now it's time for that part where everyone has been waiting for. Let's talk about this game. I really liked this, but the problem with liking this game is that everything I like about it also has a part that is equally as bad about it. And pretty much the only thing that was untouched or that I fully enjoyed is just going out into the wilderness and fighting machines. It is the only part where I'm fully behind. I did that for hours. Like I said before, there was this one time where I had to render stuff up and download at the same time, and I just didn't have the resources open to stream, so I just set out, was like, this is a good line, I go this up and down and can gather some good resources. And I did that for about 4-5 hours, and I had one hell of a time. It was so fun. And yeah. Especially the end. I think the end is a good one. Really have to think more about the end before I talk about it. Because I also see it in the context of the information dump we had in Gaia Prime. So just having this fight and crashing Hades is not really just the end. So I have to formulate my thoughts a bit more. I especially since it's fresh, I have to let it cook. But other than that, maybe we should talk about the biggest flaw of this game first, so I can talk more freely about the other good and bad things. But it involves talking about the end. Well, the best thing about this game is not only the free hunting, but I thought this game ended 4 times before this point. And each time I was like, heck yeah, more content. I can stay longer immersed in this world. Each time I also had this sad feeling of, yeah, this is gonna be the last session. But then it suddenly was like, how about we give you 4 more side quests and the main quest leads you to the next sector. Hell yeah. Each time was really great. But then came the Shadow Carja. The Shadow Carja section is something you could entirely cut out, and maybe just this one mission where you save that Shadow Carja general. That was the only mission you could argue for it being relevant, but only for saving him and having his battalion of warriors fight for you. Saving the little son dude, actually not important. It felt like filler. It was written like filler. Tons of questions laid open, and I think the main problem with that mission was it was too short. But in general, I took 2 days to stay away from this game to make sure I come to the end, the actual end, with a clear, free mind, not being clouded by my addiction to this game, to make sure that everything, good or bad, could be reflected on with the least amount of bias. And I don't know if I really succeeded in that, because I like this game, and that's why I hate negative points so much. Because, man, endings are hard. That is a line from the TV show Supernatural. It was not one of the best seasons, but alone the idea, the dialogue they had at the start of the end of an episode, where the two main characters saved someone who was writing books about them. They didn't know about him. He didn't really know about those two hunters. He just wrote what was in his head into books. And then suddenly they came to him and found out that he was writing something called a Bible about them, a series with lots of fans and stuff. But what really stuck with me is that endings are hard. You cannot really account for everything. And no matter how much you try to put into your ending, you will always disappoint someone or not reach an expectation one fan might have. There will always be plot holes, there will always be strings unattended to. But you have to do it. You have to find a way. How do you bring as many twigs and strings together and get to the end of a story? Because how will you start the next story if the previous one still goes? The Metro Exodus game, which I will play next. In the documentary about it, it's often talked about how few time and finances they had towards the end, and that is why the last maps in that game felt extremely unattended for. They wish they could have done more creative stuff in it, but not only was time pressuring on them, but also finances, so even if they wanted, they couldn't delay the game any further. That is a problem in this game that I do not see. There might have been pressure in some ways, but everything always felt like it should be. Most of these stories, especially the side stories, made sense in the setting. Like, I really like the first side mission that I did, where I found that father laying at the side of the road. Yeah, and it turns out here he was running after his child, who was going hunting, and he didn't want that. By chasing her, he injured his leg, so he hopes I could put up what he couldn't do anymore and help his child. Simple mission. I arrive at the point, she is on a hunting post, but surrounded by a bunch of watchers, so I slay the watchers, help her down, and return to her father after getting the family sphere. And that is cute, short, to the point. Then we had those hunting grounds, which were always like, it's such a nice and simple thing to say, yeah, these are really to test your skills, maybe learn something new, and every single one was oriented at around the tribes that were in that region. or were themed around the region that they were in. So those were time trials, or trials in general, in a long time, that I kind of wanted to do. And normally I never do time trials or trials in general. Yeah, because I'm not a high score person. And you could see that the Nora region was quite fleshed out. Like, I don't even hate the bad guys in this story. There were always these assholes, these generals, higher ranking, and you knew that they had a shitty job. They want to do their job, but it's also a bone grinding one. So each time you came across an arsehole, you knew why they were an arsehole. Yeah, sure, they could be nicer, but also they need to be able to demand respect. So being nice to people often weakens respect for you, so you don't do it. Of course, then there is this true arsehole, you know, the step-in war commander. But I still liked him as a character. That was probably one of the first characters I encountered that were written to be hated, but I couldn't bring myself to hate him. Because his reasoning were somewhat sound. Yeah. And you cannot expect someone to who hated you yesterday to love you today. So it's, yeah, stuff like that needs time, especially for people that have lived by a certain rule set for a long time. That's, for example, also why I don't really could hate that sun priest, that high priest, that was besieging that one shrine. Yeah, it was a shrine for the 13th Sun King. It was a place where he could remain in the old rule set, or he would think that it was basically its own region. But he wouldn't even let in the new allies, because he wanted that region to remain somewhat pure, or accompanied to the old rule set. It all makes sense, but at the end of the day, like I told to him, the old rules are in the old world and this is the new one, so he needs to step away from that place, or at least let the don't hinder newcomers to get in. So what I felt myself often in these missions is that the new leaders for certain situations were always quite vague. You had this one mission where you had that lookout boy. Sure, you only needed to bring him a few fire arrows, but as the story itself acknowledges, like, he is actually way too young to be up there. Sure, everyone could do the lookout job, but the younger you are, the easier you get distracted with stuff. Not just because it's a really boring job, but maybe you just start focusing too much on the grazers or watchmen that are waddling around in that area, so you don't pay enough attention to the mountain passes that pass by you. So maybe an attack team can make it easier past there. So with with a higher age, you have a bigger vessel for patience. So it was quite risky, but it needed to be done by someone, and every warrior was needed on the ground. So the young one had to pick up the slack in that case. Still not, it's just a resources I run thing, as thin thing. I really wanted to like Mother's End, but the entire party for the proving still off-puts me till today. That was one of the least immersive things the entire game. You were supposed to just rush through, get to the proving, talk to Ted, and that's basically it. And they had these two shows or 4 shows where you could just sit down and listen or watch the show, and that would have been fine, but a little bit the immersive element that was missing a little bit for me was a directed camera. That in the moment you're sitting down, animation finishes, some sort of auto camera would follow the storyteller, or you would go first person, something like that, to really focus you on the storyteller or the performers on the stage. But then there are also these small events where you just stand by a fire and then nothing happens. I understand that Aloy was an outcast and no one knows her, so suddenly interacting with her would be really weird. But there was also no hostility. Sure, this is an event that also welcomes young outcasts to prove themselves and become Nora again, but they did neither. That's why I liked the stand-in War Chief, because even so this event is a chance for her to come back in, he gave me sass. He straight up told me he doesn't like me, while everyone else was just there. And I wasn't there for them. That disconnected me there quite heavily. Next up would be Ross' death scene. I've talked about it a little bit in the play, but I should recap it here again. Ross lands I think he misses one arrow and hits the next one, but then he stops shooting. Even so the guy lets Aloy fall. So, but Ross decides to drop his arrow, his bow, and go into hand-to-hand combat instead of maybe shoot. Like, you could make him walk towards him, shooting more arrows, and then he starts dodging and or deflecting even arrows. And then after 2 or 3 more shots, they would have engaged in close quarter combat. So I would have. It's just so disengaging, It's like this typical horror theme, yeah, or especially out of the scary movies that had this finally designed here. Run left, you live. Run to the right side, you die, and the person runs to the right side. Yeah, choose grenade, pistol, banana, apple, kiwi, and she chooses the banana. So, yeah. In a comedy movie like that, it's really funny. But if you think about it in the moment, it really is not that funny. Chemistry between Aloy and Rost. I do not like the display of their relationship, because it really feels like they never lived together. It feels like, even when she was small, it feels like they met maybe 2-3 days before and were forced to live together for the next 2 months. Ayla would be in that mindset that she would still have come to terms with that she is stuck with this old sucker for the next 2 months. Sure, teenagers are supposed to be bashy, and acting is often a little bit over the top to to point out something better. Like, I mean, one of the best examples for that is Anime, where every character overreacts, and sometimes even seconds stretch to minutes just to point out something essential. But here it felt extremely unnatural, because she was heavily relying on him, and as a small child it makes more sense that she is more bashful. But we are living in a world where these giant machines are constantly attacking you or pose some sort of threat. So him not teaching her respect before the machines or how to live with the machines makes no sense. And that she doesn't acknowledge that he might have taught her how to hunt respectfully, it makes no sense. Sure, after he is dead at the grave, she thanks him a lot, but when they were alive, she was overly annoyed by his presence. Or not annoyed, it's more like, you think he would teach her certain things, but she doesn't know them. You know, it's like going out tenting and making a tent in the wilds, making a long march over a mountain that only has forests, and you won't find a food store for 1 week in each direction. Yeah, if you do something like that, but you leave a hunting knife at home, and you only set out with a $3 Swiss cheese knife. So, yeah. Like, a lot of kids do not like their parents, and maybe even some parents don't like their kids. And know enough stories like that, even some really extreme ones. But in this world, how nice Aloy and Ross were, as it made no sense that they wouldn't rely on each other, which is really, really sad. Sad and annoying. It's so annoying. You know, I almost wanna say, not really, but almost wanna say, they said a lot of stuff to make the plot happening. And I don't like that. the factories and level design in general. I like the first factory a lot. A lot. And while I was in it, I talked about a lot about how I was just nerding out, looking at stuff because I wanted more of this. That was the awesomeness that I always saw in the trailers. This extreme machinery and really cool metallic color schematics. The first one was really awe-inspiring. The second one I discovered was the last one, and it was extremely small. At the time, I didn't pay attention to it. I just did it. It was instantly the highest tier, and it was just like 1-2 hallways, and I instantly had to fight a Thunder Maw to get its codes. And I was like, short, to the point, nice. But when I went into the second and third one for the other creatures, I was so disconnected. Especially by the one that was inhabited by the... Oh, right. So the second one, the next one, was really freaking empty and only filled with weird climbing puzzles. And it was the first time where it's more that every climbing mechanic in this game felt either automatic, that the character would just go, and I only would have to hold down one button, with every now and then the annoyance that I would have to press spacebar, because the next climbing target would be too far away. And then to force more interaction with the player, you would have to press spacebar instead of watching a cinematic, which it often was for me. And then sometimes targeting fucked up, and Aloy just got stuck. There was even this one puzzle with where I'm supposed to find that figurine, and Aloy couldn't grab the rope. It was like 2 metal points that had a rope in between them, and Aloy thought it was a metal pole where you would hold yourself or jump to the next one. It wouldn't. She wouldn't recognize the rope that she was supposed to climb, which resulted in me having to look at the mountain and finding an alternative pathway up, which I then did. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, the second column of factory was very empty, very unengaging, besides the climbing puzzles, which I think is one of the worst points of this entire game. It's almost the lowest, besides those last missions, but we will get to them in time. And the only thing that was different, that you would have these rotary discs that would spin into a different direction. Maybe I should start showing material more on screen at this point. But there are so many parts. I don't even know. Yeah. We are like by part 160 now. Maybe I can easily find them like this. Bruh. It must be later than this. To be honest, I'll probably find it when I'm done with making my point. This is the second one where I find the thunder more. This was neat because I knew how to fight it, so it was also quite quick. So all of this is saved on an HDD. That's why it takes so long to load all of this. Yeah, but yeah, let's stop. Let's go back here. The fuck is this?
Hello, old friend. Remember me? We've still so much to discuss. So much you never revealed. Your masters, for example. The ones who sent the signal that woke you. Knowledge has its rewards, don't you think? Well, let's begin.
Well, that was minorly unsettling.